I guess I can do a video here as long as I'm not sneezing all over the place. I took a COVID shot or got a COVID booster Monday, and I've been sicker than anything. And now I've got like a sinus infection that it helped trigger. So, supposed to have a family gathering tomorrow afternoon. I don't know if I'm going to make it. But anyway, yeah, there were a couple of obits in the news that were noted, and one of them last weekend was the death, or actually Christmas Eve, was the death of Annette Dion, and she was the last of the Dion quintuplets, and they were a big deal back during the Depression. They were born in May of 1934. That was at the very depths of the Great Depression, and their unique birth, and it is unique in medical history, was cause for public attention, worldwide public attention. But it was medically unique, not just because they were the first quintuplets where all of them survived infancy and into adulthood, but they were the only, to my knowledge, the only identical quintuplets in medical history. So they were totally unique. And unfortunately for them, they had a lot of, it was a very hard life. It was not a good life that they had as kids. Yes, they were a global sensation during their childhood, starring in feature films, appearing on the covers of magazines, and endorsing products from toothpaste to syrup. And Annette had championed children's rights, and I did not know her sister Cecile had died in July, and she was also 91, and Yvonne, who's in that picture too, and these were from 1998. She died in 2001 at 67. But they were very outspoken about the way they were treated during their childhood. The first one to have died was Emily, and she died before I was born. Back in 1954 is when she died. She was only 20, and then Marie died in 1970 at the age of 35. So these three lived for many years afterward, and they were very outspoken about the way they had been treated. And they were among 14 children that their parents had, and Annette was the very last of the 14. And anyway, there is a museum, and if I remember, I'll link to the site. And it says here the museum, which had announced her death, they said she believed it was important to maintain the Dion Quince Museum and the history it provides for the future of all children. And this is real tragic. The quintuplets, Annette, Yvonne, Cecile, Emily, and Marie, were taken away from their parents by the Ontario government when they were infants. For several years, the authorities displayed the children in a compound dubbed Quintland, which became a popular tourist attraction. The children were constantly examined and observed and had limited contact with their parents and siblings. Their parents later regained custody of the Quints, and then it was not any better, because the girls, or the Quints, then accused the dad especially of abusing him. So it was not anything good. It says here, as adults, Annette, Cecile, and Yvonne sued the Ontario government for compensation over the circumstances of their childhood, and they received a settlement totaling nearly Canadian $3 million, or US, I guess, $2.2 million in 1998. Anyway, so I already said about the other Quints. But, it was an end of an era when they passed from the scene. And it was not an easy life to be in a goldfish bowl like that. But anyway, they were medically unique. And then, of course, old Brigitte Bardot finally kicked off. She was 91 years of age, and she was known first when she was born into wealth, and it wasn't exactly an easy life for her and her sister, who was also an actress. and was in that awful Sex Kittens Go to College in 1960, which had nothing to do with Brigitte. But she was in that movie with Tuesday Weld and Mamie Van Doren. And her sister lives in L.A., I guess, and she's 87. But anyway, it wasn't an easy life growing up, but she trained as a ballet dancer and then was picked for modeling. And of course, when she was really young, she had a great build, great physique, you might say, or figure, whatever. And of course, she had that pouty face, you know, the innocent face when she was very young. She was older here. What year was that? 1963. By then, she was already past her prime. And then she was in that movie. Well, she came across this guy named Roger Vadim, and that wasn't his full name. His last name was unpronounceable, so he went by his middle name. And he was a few years older, and so he directed her in a movie called And God Created Woman. And I have not seen it, and I've ordered it. I don't know if it's worth the money because they charge so damn much for some of these foreign films if you want them on DVD or even to stream it. But she created a sensation. Men drooled all over her, you know, and all this kind of thing. And so she was in a bunch of movies. And I don't know that other than this movie that she really distinguished herself much. She was the same age as Sophia Loren, but Sophia Loren really went out of her way to get substantial parts and stuff, didn't just exploit her looks. And Bardot, and I'll also say that Loren was not unstable either. She was not mentally unstable. And Bardot had battled some mental issues off and on throughout her life. And the real shitty thing was, Bardot had, you know, she was married, I think, 4 or 5 times. I think 4 times, I want to say. And the second marriage after she divorced Vadim was she had a kid by that, a son. And she just, oh my God, you know, I can't even imagine being her son and know that his mother didn't want him. And just awful. And I just kind of wonder, I never read her autobiography or whatever it was, memoir. And it's not something I ever want to read, given her politics. But it appears she had postpartum depression or something. She must have had that because she just totally rejected her kid. And so the kid's dad raised him. And that's awful. And I read somewhere else that I think she might have seen her grandkids only once or twice. And, I mean, God, you know, really not a nice person. Even before she went off the deep end politically. But anyway, she didn't like Hollywood much. Or not Hollywood, movies, let's say that. Because most of her career was in Europe. And so then she went into animal activism of the nut job, animal rights variety, not animal welfare. And so she quit the movies and decided to devote herself to animals. But you know, I don't know if it's so much she liked animals as she just didn't like people much at all. She was kind of a misanthropist. And so she would be involved in this animal rights thing or that. And so she got a lot of admirers there. But there was some real ugliness there behind the glamour. And she was a living embodiment of the saying, never judge a book by its cover. Because she really went off the beam. And in her later years, she started embracing right-wing politics and stuff. And she married that guy, that last husband, who had been an advisor to Jean-Marie Le Pen, and that's as bad as it gets. It's as bad as it gets in France to be that off the beam politically. And she talked highly of Le Pen and all this stuff. And here it says, Bardot shot to international fame in 1956 in God Created Woman, written and directed by then-husband Roger Vadim, and for the next 2 decades was said to embody the idea of the archetypal sex kitten. Well, yeah, she did, but, she kind of, that jet set life kind of took a toll. Plus, she smoked like a chimney, and she was out in the sun too much at Saint Tropez, so that aged her a lot, although, to give her credit, she didn't ever undergo the knife. So you knew when you saw her as an old woman that it was the same person. She just got old. She didn't try to look young. So that was one feather in her cap. But by God, she was nuttier than hell. It says here, yeah, she started talking about animal rights, quote unquote, increasingly active politically on the far right. Bardot's incendiary comments about ethnic minorities, immigration, Islam, and homosexuality, and she was also a misogynist, resulted in a string of convictions for inciting racial hatred. French courts fined her 6 times between 1997 and 2008 for her comments, particularly those targeting France's Muslim community. In one case, a Paris court fined her for describing Muslims as this population that is destroying us, destroying our country by imposing its acts. Oh, God. Jordan Bardella, the president of Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally Party, which Bardot supported, wrote, Brigitte Bardot was a woman of heart, conviction, and character, an ardent patriot devoted to animals that she protected throughout her life. She embodied a whole French era and, above all, a certain idea of courage and freedom. Oh, Jesus Christ. No, she had ugliness inside. She had hatred. Oh, my God. Le Pen, whom Bardot once described as the Joan of Arc of the 20th century, wrote on social media that Bardot was exceptional for her talent, courage, frankness, and beauty. Well, the only thing, she was incredibly French, fiery, indomitable whole. She will be hugely missed. Well, some will miss her. And she did have an impact in certain things, but, the bad here, unfortunately, in terms of a public thing, outweighs the good, because you don't embrace a bunch of damn fascists. And the thing is, I was, following her death, I was talking about this, online, social media, and it seems like most of the apologists for this woman were men. Gee, I wonder why. They're thinking not with their brains, not the brain in their head, but, elsewhere. And they think, well, because she's hot, or was hot, that she gets a pass. But nobody gets a pass for that kind of crap. That was really bad. And anyhow, but they talk about her here. I'll link this. This is a pretty long obituary here. And that's her in her, it looks like her ballet getup, that she's got ballet shoes there. But yeah, she went all over the place talking about animals. And then, but she hated gays and lesbians and Muslims. Oh, shit. Yeah, anyway, she just was messed up. But anyhow, that's all I gotta say about that. For this new year. Hopefully it's better than last year. We'll see. And I hope I start feeling better. Anyway, that's it.